most of the decisions we need to make requires some consideration. The wise voice, which is always at our beck and call within each of us, is that of the Holy Spirit. It is comforting to realize we can be certain of every action that we take if we have sought the guidance and truly listened to the inner voice of divine spirit. The choice to get direction or the information we need is ours to make moment by moment in perfect union with the infinite. So as we go deeper within, I simply invite you to contemplate these words. I seek and I follow divine guidance with complete trust and faith. in this moment, in this space, in this incredible sense of oneness, I know there is only that infinite beauty, peace, and connection among all who are present, here and beyond the walls of the sanctuary. I know God is all there is. And as such, all are connected in a holy communion of spirit, individualized and gathered together to enjoy this day as it perfectly unfolds with the messaging from Reverend Natasha, for the music that supports every fiber of our being, for the incredible wisdom and intelligence that has provided us with communication and direct connection with everyone beyond into the world and beyond, heart to heart, mind to mind. The beauty and the grace of the day unfold perfectly, for I know that all is in divine order and only truth and light and grace fill each heart and flow with the perfect energy in perfect union with the divine infinite. I call it good and very good. And together we say, and so it is. And now it's my pleasure to bring back Lesley Alexander with her wonderful music.
Good morning. When I was a girl each week, and Sunday I would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything, everything, oh, everything is holy now. When I went to Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything, everything, oh, everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even bigger magic trick is that there's anything here at all. So a challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything, everything, oh, everything is holy now. Read a questioning child's face and say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then, 'cause everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything, everything, oh, everything is holy now. Everything, everything, oh, everything is holy now. Everything, 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 everything is holy now.
Beautiful, Lesley. Thank you so much. Well, now that Lesley's taken care of the whole talk, we can all go home. Oh, good morning once again, everyone here gathered in the sanctuary, and welcome everybody who is joining us this morning on Zoom or Facebook or will join us later. We're so glad to have you join our community, Om Center for Spiritual Living here in La Mesa, and I am Natasha Eckholm. So wonderful to see you all, and it's so wonderful to see the sun shining. I don't know if you feel that way, but yeah, it's really lovely. So it's a great way to start summer, right? Summer just began on Wednesday, first day of summer on the solstice, so we're now in the season, and it's a lovely time of year. So this year, as you know, our theme is living out loud, and what that means is actually living the principles of science of mind in your daily life. So not just reading about it in the textbook or other publications, and not just listening to people like me up here on the platform on a Sunday, but actually taking those principles into your life and seeing how they work and what they do. And our theme for this month has been embracing self-care. Now, in some ways, we live in an age of self-care, don't we, right? We encounter that idea of self-care a lot, right? Eating well, sleeping well, exercising our bodies, but we don't always think about how self-care applies to our spiritual practice, except maybe feeling a little guilty. Oh, when we were kids, did you say your prayers? Oh, yeah, no, I didn't say my prayers tonight, right? But our teaching is fundamentally about practice. There's no way out of it. And the thing is, no one else is going to punish you, right? The only person who experiences the effects of not doing practice, not having a practice, is you. So what we're really going to talk about this morning is intention and action. Some of the other things we've talked about this month have been leading up to this. So we've talked about the evolution and kind of growth of our spirituality. We've talked about balancing big emotions like grief and joy. And we've talked about pleasure, right? There's a word that sometimes is a little hard to process. I don't know about you. I was certainly raised in a household where there were occasional permissions to have pleasure. Christmas morning, for example, right? Or your birthday, right? But that most of the time you were supposed to be doing your duty, right? Living up to the expectations and obligations of others. And if you had pleasures, maybe you thought about them as guilty pleasures sometimes, right? Whatever those might be. But that's not how we think in religious science. That is not what we teach. We believe, right, that we are manifest physical expressions of whatever you want to call that greater thing that has created us, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it spirit or universe or the quantum field, any number of things. But the point is, we are the manifest expressions of that greater thing. And that greater thing, we believe, is good. So all the good that you can experience is already present in us. So it's not a question of doing something wrong, right, to experience the good that is already in us. So part of our opportunity in life, and I love how serendipity happens. I walked up here this morning and there was a bookmark on the podium. It says, "What we are is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God." That is a beautiful way to express this idea, right? So God has already bestowed upon us, endowed in us, is moving in us and through us as all the good that it is. What we do with that, what we allow to come through, is the gift that we give back. And it's one of those strange, I'm not sure what even is the right word, one of those strange paradoxes perhaps of life is that we arrive on the planet and we immediately do not remember where we came from. We don't know who we are. And if we're lucky, perhaps in the circumstances in which we are born into, someone helps us remember pretty early on. But many of us don't have that experience. And our process of remembering might take place over many years. I once met someone, and I think I've shared this with you before, met someone who had been raised in religious science. And he was speaking at a conference and he talked about, what a blessing it had been to be raised in this teaching. It was so great, but that he envied people who came to this teaching later because they would come and share with him all of these stories about their lives, which he called their Lord of the Rings stories, right? All of the incredible difficulties and challenges, mountains they had to climb, rivers they had to ford, armies that they had to evade in their lives to come to this teaching, to start to understand who they were. And in a way, he envied that because their appreciation for this gift that God has given us was so great. Whereas in a way, he kind of took it for granted. He grew up with it. So whether you have grown up in this teaching or you are coming to it through your own Lord of the Rings story, you are welcome here this morning. Okay. So one of the really important things about understanding this principle, this idea that God has created us and is expressing itself in us and through us, and I want to, We will get there in a minute. But I just want to read one of our fundamental principles. We believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. The manifest universe is the body of God. It is the logical and necessary outcome of the infinite self-knowingness of God. Okay. What does that mean? That's a lot of words, isn't it? Ernest Holmes was such a brilliant man, and he wrote very much in the style, right, of the early 20th century, and it's a very wordy style, right? So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to unpack it. Here's another way that this has been expressed. Creation is the result of the outpush of life into self-expression. It is the coming forth of spirit into manifestation. The one encompasses and flows through all, spilling itself into numberless forms and personalities. So I want you to keep those two words in mind as we go through our conversation this morning, forms and personalities. But what this means is that we are manifest beings. We are one with the universe. Spirit is us. We are spirit. And there is, therefore, no impossibility at a certain level, right? There is infinite possibility that we may access in order to become the person that we would like to be and to have a greater experience of life. That is the promise of this teaching. We may all have a greater experience of life, and we may all claim that greater good that is who we are. And it is our project, our life project, to figure out what are we called to. And we do that through our intuition, and we cultivate that intuition, sort of that hearing what it is that we are called to do with any number of spiritual practices and tools. We're going to talk a little bit more this morning about visualization as one of them. And one of the things that's important to remember about this is, and this is a quote from Henry David Thoreau, "It is the beauty within us that makes it possible for us to recognize the beauty around us. The question is not what you look at, but what you see." So, I don't know about you, sometimes I kind of forget this and I get a little overwhelmed by just the incessant stream of negative information flowing into my life, right? I'd like to know what's going on in San Diego or in the world sometimes, but gosh, turn on the news, turn on any medium that you get, and you're just inundated with the negative. And it makes it really hard sometimes to see the beauty that's around, to see that good that is in ourselves and others. When you look around your world, do you see good or do you see negativity? Do you envision or experience God or spirit or whatever you're wanting to think about it as something far away? Or is it present in you or in others that you're experiencing? So these are some of the images that I have of the divine. So I think lots of us experience the divine often as nature, right? And that's an idea, of course, that goes back, throughout the history of humankind. Probably one of the greatest people who expressed this was Ralph Waldo Emerson, right, and his friend Henry David Thoreau, that sense of the majesty, that infinite power that is the divine was easier perhaps to access in nature. And so roses, trees, the galaxies, those are some of the things that I feel connected by. We sometimes are able to experience through people, right? People that we are close to, or sometimes people that maybe we've never met, but there is something about them that allows us to connect with that sense of something greater because of their own sense of connection. That's something that they can share. So that picture on the bottom corner, of course, that's me. And the reason that I included it this morning was because when I first came to this teaching of the science of mind, I was not in a very good place in my life. Every day felt like a huge struggle for me. And I happened to come across this photo one day, and I was really struck by the fact, and I'm probably about a year and a half old in that photograph. It was very joyful. It was something in me that did not yet know, that had not yet experienced anything that I would perceive as negative. And so I was simply present with joy in the world. I could not remember, honestly, ever feeling like that in my own conscious memory. But I could look at that photograph and say, wow, I must have. What could that have been like? So I started to just kind of meditate on what that might have felt like, to imagine what joy would feel like. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I had never experienced any joy in my life, absolutely, but not in a sense in a kind of sustained way. And I didn't think of that joy as residing in myself. I thought of joy as something that you might encounter, right? Something happens. It's a joyous moment. That's great. But it's not something that's living inside you, right? It's something external. But I realized in looking at that photo that that joy already resided in me, and that perhaps I could find my way back to that joy that existed in me then and must surely still exist in me. And so I labeled that photo in my computer Essential Self, to help me remember that that's who I really am. And that was about, well, almost 20 years ago. And so I share this because whatever that is for you, I want to invite you to think about that part of yourself that has always been that expression of the something greater, that expression of spirit, the divine, that expression of love, that expression of peace, that expression of power. It is whatever resonates for you, but it's in you. And if you haven't connected with it, or if at the moment something is getting in your way of connecting with it, I just want to remind you that it's there. If there is an image or a sound or a song or a sensation that helps you connect to it, I want to invite you to just, while we're talking this morning, to just bring that forward. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, what do we do with that? For a moment, I'd like you, we're just going to do a little exercise. I want you to look around the room and spot maybe someone you don't know, or perhaps even that you maybe don't feel super comfortable around. Totally okay. And just glance, don't stare at them, don't make eye contact, just look around really quickly. So, feel that sense for a moment of separation, right? The boundary. We are missing the opportunity to have a greater experience of God when we get stuck in those boundaries, right? You never know when a person is going to kind of break out of themselves and have God just move through them, right? And if you're focused on the boundary, you might miss that, right? That's why we come together as community here at Ohm. We're all carrying a divine spark, and we're all particularizing or personalizing the infinite. We're going to talk a little bit more about what personalizing looks like. And we are never as in sync with the divine as when we recognize it in somebody else. So that's another dimension of being in community, that opportunity to be in connection with others, to recognize that divine in others, and to practice recognizing it out in the world. It doesn't mean you have to love everybody. It doesn't even have to mean you have to love everybody in here. But it's an invitation to just think about, because we are all basically like a cell, right, in a great whole. And there's a group of cells that are hanging around here. We're all part of that greater thing. So, personalization. What does that mean? Oh, somehow this is not the right one. Sorry, they got out of order. We'll go here first. So Roger Teal, who is a now retired minister in our movement, says this: as we make welcome higher ideas, we are equipped to put our unique personal spin on them. Yet they flow to us from that immense intelligence at the heart of this universe. As individualized expressions of spirit, of love and intelligence, each of us lives within an infinite ocean of possibility. At any moment, we can open to receive, cultivate a transformative idea beyond anything we have ever realized before. Ernest Holmes famously said he would rather see people practice our teachings and prove the principles than read all the most holy spiritual books, including his, right? That there was the practice, but he said the practice of this is personal to each individual, and no one can live our lives for us, right? So reading Ernest Holmes is not going to live your life for you. Listening to me this morning is not going to live your life for you. Only you can do that, right? So how we use these gifts that God has given us, that are within us. And by gifts, I mean both sort of the unique talents, the ways that we express that divine, like in Lesley's beautiful music this morning, or Brenda's amazing artwork that she does. And everybody has the things that they do that express, that are creative, right? But beyond that, also just that good that is God. And we are all always expressing that all the time. That love, that peace, that sense of abundance and possibility, that wisdom. We are all channels for all of that good all the time. So he says to hold one's thought steadfastly to the constructive, right? To that which endures, and to the truth may not be easy in a rapidly changing world. But to the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. Now imagine he wrote that in the 1920s in his rapidly changing world. It sure feels like our world is rapidly changing right now, doesn't it? Like beyond perhaps what could have even been imagined in science fiction back then, right? So what do we hold on to? So for me, there are a couple of things to keep in mind about this idea of personalization. So one is simply that it is understanding our connection to the divine. And Holmes comments to us that as human beings, it is our nature to kind of personalize this greater entity by making it more like a person, right? Because that's how we form connection and relationship, right? Intimacy. Now, some of us have experienced kind of negative expressions of this, right? You know, if you have experienced faith teaching where God is judgmental and punitive, that is not somebody that you really want to be around, or certainly not somebody I really want to be around, right? But you can also understand the divine as loving, as supportive, as uplifting. And if you struggle to have that sense of connection, if God or spirit or infinite intelligence seems very difficult to connect to, that's something that you can work on yourself. It's also something you can work on with our practitioners and our ministers to help you find what is your way of connecting. But that sense of connection is really important. It's fundamental to the next step in personalization, which is to call forth into your life your way of expressing that divine, right? So each of us has a way to do that. And we've talked a little bit about how creativity is one of those ways that the divine flows through our lives. Whatever that work is for you, you know, that is part of your life journey. And maybe you already know what it is. Maybe you are doing the work that calls you forward, that makes you want to wake up every morning. You're full of passion to do it. That, you know, whether it's paid or not paid, it is your purpose for being, right? Whether it's caring for people, gardening, creating, you're doing something. And that is another means of personalization, of personalizing, of particularizing. These are some of these words that we're using, but really of calling forward that divine in you to be your heart's desire, right? Are you living your heart's desire? Do you know what your heart's desire is? That is your work to do that. And it may feel like it's really hard at first if you haven't been used to thinking about things like that. Some of you have heard Reverend Suzette say that I was a student who asked her the most questions ever, always. And that's partly because at the point, you know, at the point in my life where I encountered this teaching, I had no idea, how do you get there? You know, I really wanted it, but I couldn't understand it. And so I was asking her questions all the time. And of course she did her best to answer them. But for a long time, I just hung on to her as an example. And what I mean by that is not the specifics of her example, just the fact that she was sort of somehow on this other side of where I wanted to get to. And maybe I didn't know how to get there, but I could look at her and think, it's possible to get there if I just keep going, if I just keep putting one foot in front of the other, if I just keep listening and using these tools that I'm learning about, I can get there. And you know, 20 years ago, if you had ever asked me if I would be standing on this podium talking to you, I would have thought you were out of your mind. But there you go, right? And this is also part of what we don't realize, I think, sometimes, is that those things that are within us, that are waiting to be expressed, are just waiting for us to get out of the way, right? And that's also part of our life journey, is to learn how to get out of our own way. Yeah. I came across something actually after I made this other slide, so I just want to read it to you because I think it really is a great image. You can choose to be either a thermostat or a thermometer. The thermometer responds to the environment. It's reactive. The thermostat sets the temperature and creates the desired condition. So we're going to talk about in a moment about visualization. Visualization is a technique that allows you to set the parameters and helps you make your future vision a reality. In creative visualization, you direct your brain to focus on what matters the most to you. What you focus on and take deliberate steps toward is more likely to become a reality. So I invite you right here and right now to think about yourselves as thermostats, and there should be a piece of paper around that was on your chair that has a little visualization practice, and I just want to review it with you because I want to invite you to, and if you don't have one, maybe you can read along with someone who has one right next to you, and we can give you one afterwards. So you can title this at the top, Directions for Being a Thermostat. Okay. So this is just to suggest, so this is a tool for spiritual practice. You can do it at any time, of course, but a good time to do it is before you go to bed, sometimes because you've kind of left the busyness of the day behind you and you're entering into a quieter space where there's room for you to envision your heart's desire, something that is important to you that you want to express or experience in your life. So I'm just going to read through the steps briefly and invite you to take this home and work on it. So you'll begin by turning within and breathing deeply. And then you'll continue by knowing and affirming your oneness with Spirit. And then you will know that you are worthy of all the good that there is. I know that one's hard. We struggle with worthiness. But that's why it's a practice. Imagine what you want to experience, what you desire, what your heart's desire is, and sketch it out in your mind. But rather than focus too deeply on the details, focus on the feeling that you have about it. Focus on what you imagine you would feel when you are experiencing it. Whether that is excitement, joy, peace, security, whatever that feeling is, that positive feeling. Imagine it already is and allow yourself to feel that emotion deeply and breathe into it. And as you do this, affirm this to yourself. Say yes, this or something greater. Give thanks. And then continue. Continue until that manifestation takes place. And this is the process of personalizing, of bringing that forward into your experience. So whatever the senses are that resonate for you in bringing things forward, maybe it's vision, maybe it's sound, maybe there's a song, that a piece of music that when you hear it makes you feel so happy that bring that into it, right? Or a smell or a sensation. For me, sometimes that's what it's like to be at the ocean. That's my happy place. So I bring that sense of joy that I get when I'm breathing the salt air into it. Whatever that is that for you, bring that into your visualization. So, with that, my fellow thermostats, I just want to conclude by reminding you that whatever may have happened in your life up until now does not define who you are. It is simply your experience. And in this moment and every moment moving forward, if there's something that you haven't yet experienced that you would like to, something that you don't want to experience again, don't focus on what you don't want, right? That's really important. Focus on what you do want. Focus on what you want to call forward in yourself. That is good. That is positive. Because that is what is in alignment with what we are. And the more that we keep that remembering of what we are, right? That sense, as I showed you in that little photo of me, of what is within us, has always been within us and is just waiting to be rediscovered. The greater our ability to bring forward into our experience that good that we desire, whether it is a relationship, whether it is a place to live, whether it is work that is fulfilling, whether it is some other thing. I think that sometimes people, when they are learning about New Thought, get a little confused about the question of prosperity in relation to things. There's nothing wrong with things. If there is a thing that is going to make you happy, that's great. Visualize that. But that's really not the point. The point is not the things. The point is the process that brings you to your understanding of the divinity within you and your ability as a channel, as a vehicle, as a being through whom this good can flow. Because the more flows, the more you get out of the way, the greater not only your own life experience, but that of everybody around you. And so when we talk about that global heart vision in our movement, this idea of the world that works for everyone, it is that conviction that when we are all in that state of flow, of good, then by definition, the world will work for everyone. So, I leave you with that this morning. Your opportunity to create a greater life for yourself and our collective responsibility, right? As infinite expressions all together of that greater one, to be doing so together to create a more wonderful, profound, and beautiful life experience. Thank you so much.